The most expensive American car ever sold at auction was built by a brand that doesn't exist anymore. Plymouth was Chrysler's cheap division, the taxi brand. The brand your parents bought because it was what they could afford. And that's exactly why Plymouth built things no expensive brand would have touched. A wing taller than the roof, an engine that got banned for winning too hard, and a convertible that only 11 of them are left. Maybe 12. Nobody's actually sure. We went through 73 years of factory production records from the first Plymouth to the last one that ever rolled off a line. 11 cars. An engine outlawed 3 months after it swept a race. And a 73-year-old brand wiped out by the same company that built it. And if you think the Mustang invented the pony car, settle in. Plymouth put one on sale 16 days earlier. In 1958, you could buy a Plymouth with electronic fuel injection. That's not a typo. Electronic fuel injection. An analog computer, 8 injectors, fuel held at regulated pressure. 20 years before the rest of the industry figured out how to make it work. It didn't work. It was called the Electrojector. Bendix built it, and it cost $500 on top of a 350 cubic inch engine. The cars came down the line with 2 4-barrel carburetors, got shipped over to the DeSoto plant on Warren Avenue, and on a separate assembly line the carbs came off and the injection went on. The electronics couldn't handle vibration or heat or humidity. The cars stalled. Dealers ended up pulling the injection back off, bolting the carburetors back on, and refunding the difference, about $175. And here's the first number that's going to sting. According to the superintendent of the plant that installed them, out of every Chrysler product that got the Electrojector, exactly 2 were Plymouths. That same fury is the car Stephen King turned into a monster 25 years later. Christine, a '58 Plymouth that repairs itself and kills people, which if you think about it is the precise opposite of what the real thing did. Plymouth had the engines. 305 horsepower out of the dual-quad Golden Commando, and an engineering staff running 2 decades ahead of everybody else in Detroit. What it didn't have was a shape anybody wanted to buy. Summer of 1959. Chrysler President William Newberg is at a party. He overhears Ed Cole, the head of Chevrolet, talking about General Motors shrinking their cars. Newberg goes back to the office and gives an order. Cut down the 1962 Plymouth and the 1962 Dodge. Production was 18 months out. The design studios went to round-the-clock shifts. The wheelbase came down from 119 inches to 116. Styling chief Virgil Exner fought it, lost, and called the cars that came out the other end plucked chickens. Newberg had misheard. Chevrolet wasn't shrinking its full-size car. It was adding a small one alongside it. In 1961, with styling nobody was willing to defend, Plymouth built roughly 213,000 cars. In 1962, with the brand new ones, it built 182,000. Plymouth dropped from 4th in the industry to 8th. Newberg resigned within months, caught up in a kickback scandal with suppliers. Exner got fired anyway, even though he'd been promised he wouldn't take the blame. But the cars were smaller. And smaller means lighter, and lighter, at a drag strip, means quicker. Around this same stretch, the story goes that Lynn Townsend, who'd end up running Chrysler, asked his teenage sons what people were saying about the company's cars out on Woodward Avenue, the strip in Detroit where kids race stoplight to stoplight every night. What his boys told him was that nobody talked about Dodge or Plymouth out there, that they just weren't part of it. What came out of that was called the Superstock 413. The world knows it as the Max Wedge. The block came from the truck division, with extra nickel in the iron so it could take more abuse. Forged crank with flame-hardened journals. Huge upswept exhaust manifolds. And sitting on top, a cross-ram intake with 2 4-barrel carburetors aimed in opposite directions. 410 horsepower advertised. 420 with the high compression heads. They were built at Lynch Road in Detroit, and only a few hundred got made. Ray Brock at Hot Rod Magazine took a 1962 Plymouth 413 and ran the quarter mile in 12.37 seconds at 114 miles per hour. Stock. Exactly the way it left the showroom. That year, Max Wedge cars set 4 class records in the NHRA books. The following year, the engine grew to 426 cubic inches and 425 horsepower. And that's where the Max Wedge topped out. It was as fast as anybody was going to get with a wedge-shaped combustion chamber. But across town, a small group of engineers had been working on something else for months. An engine Chrysler didn't show anybody until the morning of a race. And once they finally showed it, it took less than a year to get it banned. February 23, 1964, Daytona. Chrysler shows up with an engine nobody has seen run. Hemispherical combustion chambers, 426 cubic inches. They call it the Hemi. It's so far ahead that NASCAR orders the Chrysler teams to sandbag in practice and qualifying. Don't show what you've got. Race morning, they stop hiding it. Richard Petty, 26 years old, number 43, leads 184 of the 200 laps. 60 years later, that's still the record for laps led in the Daytona 500. He wins by a lap in 9 seconds. Behind him, Jimmy Pardue and Paul Goldsmith. All 3 cars are Plymouths. All 3 have the Hemi. Chrysler takes 4 of the top 5 spots in front of 70,000 people, and Petty pockets $33,300. It's his first superspeedway win. The first of 7 Daytona 500 wins, so NASCAR bans the engine. The Hemi is outlawed for the 1965 season, and Chrysler pulls out entirely. Petty doesn't run a single one of the year's 33 races. He takes his Plymouth drag racing instead. On February 28, 1965, at Southeastern Dragway in Georgia, his car leaves the strip and goes into the spectator area. A 6-year-old boy named Wayne Dye is killed. 7 other people are injured. The Hemi came back to NASCAR in 1966. That year, it was Ford that walked out in protest. But while Chrysler was fighting that war, Plymouth won a completely different race. One almost nobody remembers it winning. On April 1, 1964, Plymouth put the Barracuda on sale. The Mustang launched on April 17th at the New York World's Fair, 16 days later. Officially, the Barracuda was an option package on the Valiant. That's what it said on the paperwork, Valiant Barracuda, 2365, a 273 cubic inch V8 making 180 horsepower, and it very nearly got named the Panda. The only radical thing about it was the glass. 14.4 square feet of wraparound rear window, developed by Pittsburgh Plate Glass alongside Chrysler's designers. The largest single piece of glass ever fitted to a production car up to that point. Fold the rear seat down and you had 7 feet of flat floor underneath that greenhouse. Plymouth sold 23,443 Barracudas for the entire model year. Ford sold roughly 22,000 Mustangs on day 1. By the time the books closed, it was 126,000 Mustangs against 23,000 Barracudas. Plymouth got there first and lost anyway. And that's the problem it took the company 2 more years to understand. The Mustang looked like a new car. The Barracuda looked like a Valiant with a strange back window. The answer wasn't getting there first. It was building something that looked on the outside like what it had underneath. In 1966, Plymouth finally put the Hemi in a street car, and found out almost nobody was willing to pay what it cost. To sell the Hemi to a regular customer, Chrysler had to make it worse on purpose. The race engine made something like 550 horsepower and wouldn't start cold. So they gave it cast iron heads instead of aluminum, 2 Carter carburetors instead of the racing Holly, a milder camshaft, compression dropped to 10.25 to 1, and a choke, so the thing would actually fire up on a January morning. What was left got called the Street Hemi, 425 horsepower and 490 pound-feet of torque. Advertised anyway. Later dyno work points a good bit higher. The problem was the price. Checking the Hemi box on a satellite ran about $1,000, close to a third of what the whole car cost. So let's count who actually bought one. In 1966, Chrysler built 2,730 Street Hemi cars across 4 nameplates, 741 Dodge Coronets, 468 Chargers, 677 Plymouth Belvederes, and 844 satellites. Of those, 817 hardtops and 27 convertibles. The Satellite was the best-selling Hemi car of that first year, and still 27 ragtops in the entire country. That's not even the strange part. The strange part is the year after. In 1967, Plymouth put the Hemi in 2 satellite hardtops and 1 convertible. 3 cars, all year. So if the Hemi was impossible to sell, the answer was to build something people could actually walk in and buy. And in 1967, Plymouth did. The GTX was the top trim of the Belvedere, and that was the only year it ever was. Standard equipment was the 440 Super Commando, 375 horsepower, 480 pound-feet. Console tack, blacked-out grille, fake hood scoops, chrome pop-open fuel cap, red line tires. They marketed it as the gentleman's muscle car. $3,178 for the hardtop. The Hemi was still on the option sheet, now for $564.40. With the 440, a GTX ran the quarter in 15.2. With the Hemi, 13.5 at 105. Plymouth built 12,010 hardtops and 680 convertibles. According to the production records, roughly 730 got the Hemi, and only 17 of those were convertibles. The GTX worked, but it was expensive, it was comfortable, and it was built for grown-ups. And there was a buyer in Detroit that nobody was serving, the 22-year-old who wanted to go fast and didn't have $3,000. To reach him, Plymouth was about to do something no car company has done since. Pay a cartoon studio $50,000. $50,000 to Warner Brothers for the name and likeness of a cartoon bird. $10,000 more to develop the horn. And as the story went afterward, somewhere between $10 and $15 for every car sold. The bird in the cartoons doesn't say beep beep. It says meep meep. But the engineer's first pass sounded weak, so they tuned it until it said beep beep, which caused friction with Warner, because the character's voice is protected property too. 2 years later, Plymouth went back and tried to license the Tasmanian Devil for the Duster. Warner asked for too much, and the deal died. The car's target was written on a single sheet of paper, 14-second quarter mile, under $3,000. They hit it by taking things out. The 1968 Roadrunner had no carpet, you got a rubber mat. Bench seat, rear windows that didn't roll down. Chrome kept to the legal minimum. If you wanted carpet and brightwork, the decor package was $79.20. What it did have was the engine. On paper, it's a 383, the same block half of Chrysler's lineup was using. In reality, it wasn't. They gave it the heads, the camshaft, the exhaust manifolds, and the valve springs off the 440 Super Commando, 10-to-1 pistons, the 440's windage tray, a Carter AVS, an unsilenced air cleaner, and dual exhaust. A regular 383 made 290, 300, or 330, depending on the version. This one made 335, 2896, 0 to 60 in 7.3 quarter mile in 15.37. And if you wanted more, the Hemi was right there for $714.30. Plymouth expected to sell about 20,000. It sold 45,000. Third best-selling muscle car in the country, behind only the GTO and the Chevelle SS 396. So in 1969, the cheap car became the crown jewel. Motor Trend named it Car of the Year. 81,125 built for the US. plus another $3,295 for Canada and export. And halfway through the model year, Plymouth did something odd. It was called the A12 package. $462.80 got you a 440, with 3 Holley 2-barrel carburetors sitting on an aluminum Edelbrock intake, the first production manifold Edelbrock ever built for an automaker. 390 horsepower and 490 pound-feet of torque, the exact same number as the Hemi, at lower RPM. On top of that sat a black fiberglass hood, the whole thing liftoff held down by 4 pins, the only Mopar that ever left a factory like that. Underneath, a Dana 60 with 4.10 gears, black steel wheels with no hubcaps, and air conditioning wasn't even available. It ran the quarter in 12.91, bone stock. 12 cars came down the line with a 383 in them and got the engine swapped afterward. The story goes that the mechanics braced a knee against the inner fender while they lifted the blocks in and out, which is why some of these cars left the factory with a small dent in exactly the same spot. A little over 1,400 were built. Sources don't agree on the exact figure, but the most brutal Plymouth of those years couldn't be registered at all. In 1968, Chrysler sent a batch of Barracudas to Hearst Performance in Michigan to be turned into race cars. They got the race Hemi shoehorned into a body that was never designed to hold it, with the shock towers hammered in to make room. Fiberglass hood and fenders, thin gauge doors and bumpers, lightweight side glass, battery in the trunk, no back seat. They shipped with a written warning, not street legal, for supervised acceleration trials only. They were called BO29 cars. Sources disagree on how many got built. The number that comes up most often is 70. Ronnie Sox took one and ran 10.22 seconds at 134 miles an hour. The class record was 11.05. The NHRA didn't penalize him. It moved him to a different class. And that kind of dominance had consequences. In 1970, Sox and his partner Buddy Martin won the first NHRA Pro Stock World Championship ever awarded. In 1971, they reached 6 of the 8 final rounds all season. They didn't win the title, and the year after that, with the rules rewritten, they didn't win a single race. Because there was a pattern with Plymouth. Every time it built something too good, somebody rewrote the rulebook. And in 1970, it happened for the 3rd time. This round, against a car with a 2-foot wing. The Superbird exists because Richard Petty left. In 1969, Petty saw what Dodge was doing with the Charger Daytona and asked Plymouth for a winged car. Plymouth said no. Chrysler told him to stay put, so Petty went to Ford, won 10 races, finished second in points, and spent the season driving for the competition with his name on the roof. Plymouth built the Superbird to get him back. The catch was homologation. That year, NASCAR changed the rule. 500 units wasn't enough anymore. Now you had to build one car for every 2 dealerships you had. For Plymouth, that came out to about 1,920. So they took a Roadrunner and added a 19-inch nose cone and a rear wing standing nearly 5 feet off the ground. The story goes it was mounted that high so the trunk could open underneath it, though not every engineer backs that up. The scoops on the hood didn't do anything. Engines. The 444 barrel at 375, the 446 barrel at 390, and the Hemi at 425. There was no 383 and only 135 Superbirds left with the Hemi. $4,300. And here's the paradox of the car. Below 100 miles an hour, all that aerodynamic work did nothing at all. In the quarter mile, a regular Roadrunner was quicker. The Superbird only made sense at 200. At 200, it worked. Petty came back to Plymouth for the 1970 season. His teammate Pete Hamilton won the Daytona 500 and both Talladega races in a Superbird. Between the Superbird and the Charger Daytona, the winged cars took more than 30 of the 48 races that year. It was too much. For 1971, NASCAR capped winged cars at 305 cubic inches. Chrysler didn't build that engine. They didn't ban the cars. They made them pointless. Chrysler walked away from the Superbird less than a year after launching it. But the part that's hardest to believe didn't happen on a racetrack. It happened on dealer lots. Nobody wanted them. A car with a nose cone half a meter long and a wing you could lean on wasn't what a 1970 buyer had in mind for the commute. Superbird sat for months, and some dealers found a workaround. They pulled the nose off, pulled the wing off, bolted on regular Roadrunner sheet metal, and moved them that way. One of those cars nobody wanted, a Hemi Superbird in Tor Red, sold a few years back for $1.65 million. And that isn't even Plymouth's record, because while Superbirds were rotting on dealer lots, over in Hamtramck, they were building the car that's worth twice as much. In 1970, Plymouth threw the Barracuda out and started over. The new platform was called the E-Body. John Hurlitz drew it, and it was 5 inches wider than the car it replaced. Those 5 inches are the reason this chapter exists. For the first time, the Hemi fit. 3 trim levels: Barracuda, Grand Coupe, and Cuda, and 9 engines, from a 198 cubic inch slant, 6, all the way to the Hemi. In a Cuda, you could pick the 340, the 383, the 440 Super Commando, the 440 6-barrel, or the Hemi. Every Hemi Cuda got the shaker hood, the one that pokes through the sheet metal and shakes with the engine. Motor Trend tested one that may 0 to 60 in 5.8 quarter mile in a flat 14. The Hemi added about $900, close to a third of the price of the car, which is why, out of every Cuda built in 1970, 666 got it, 652 hardtops, and 14 convertibles. Remember that number. That same year, Plymouth went Trans Am racing with Dan Gurney's All-American Racers. To be eligible, the car had to be homologated, so they built the AAR Cuda, 2,724 of them, all built at Hamtramck between March 11th and April 17th. 5 weeks. It ran the 340 with 3 carburetors, a fiberglass hood, side exit exhaust, strobe stripes, and taller tires in the back than the front. The race engine got destroked to 305 cubic inches to fit the class limit, and it needs saying plainly, they didn't win anything. 3 poles, 0 victories. Best finish was second at Road America, but the most important Plymouth of that year wasn't any of those cars. It was a Valiant with a different roof. The Duster 340 cost $25.47, 275 horsepower, 340 pound-feet, 0 to 60 in 6 seconds flat, quarter mile in 14.7. Internally, the team's code name for it was CK for Clark Kent. Plymouth sold 24,817 of them. That same year, it sold 19,515 Cudas, with every engine combined. The cheap car won. Again. And then there's the paint. Vitamin C, Limelight, Inviolate, Sassy Grass, Moulin Rouge, Tor Red, Lemon Twist. They called them high-impact colors, and some lasted a single year. Limelight was 1970 only. Moulin Rouge ran one spring, then went special order. Curious Yellow existed strictly in 1971. Moulin Rouge was pink. Under 0.5% of 1970, Barracudas left the factory that way, and dealers repainted some just to move them. And as the story's been told for decades, the names Chrysler rejected were better than the ones it approved. Statutory Grape, Gang Green, Well Red, Frank Lloyd White, and one called Fisher Body Rust, which was a direct shot at General Motors. 1970 was the best year Plymouth ever had. The next one was the last real one. It was also the prettiest. The 1971 Cuda had 4 round headlights, a 6-tooth grille, 4 fake gills on the fenders, and enormous billboard graphics down the side with the engine printed inside them. All of that existed for 1 year. Never before, never again. And it landed right as the market collapsed. Barracuda sales fell from over 55,000 to somewhere around 16.5. It was the last year for the Hemi, for the 446 barrel, for the 383, for the convertible. Chrysler pulled out of Trans Am and the AAR was gone. The 666 Hemi Cudas of 1970 became 114, and out of those 114, 7 were convertibles for the American market. Counting exports, 11, maybe 12. Stellantis, the company that owns the brand today, doesn't know the exact number. One of them, painted in violet and shipped to Canada, turned up on New Year's Eve of 2001. It was 5 days away from being scrapped. In June of 2014, a bright blue 1971 Hemi Cuda convertible with a 4-speed sold at auction for $3.5 million. New, it had cost about $4,500. The Roadrunner name survived, the car didn't. From 1976 to 1980, Roadrunner was a sticker package on a compact called the Volare. $205, 145 horsepower. The one good part was the suspension, which came out of the police package. It sold 18,719 units in 5 years. The original sold 45,000 in 12 months. The name died in 1980. The brand hung on another 20 years selling Dodges with a different badge. The Prowler, its last car of its own, was a $30,000 roadster with no V8. On November 3, 1999, Daimler Chrysler announced the shutdown. On June 28, 2001, the last Plymouth ever built rolled out of Belvedere, Illinois. A silver neon, $18,210, with a manual transmission. 73 years, and the PT Cruiser, designed to be a Plymouth, went on sale that same year wearing a Chrysler badge. The brand that built the most expensive American car in history ended up too cheap to keep alive. Plymouth died. Dodge didn't. The sister brand shared engines, platforms, and factories with everything you just watched, and it's still here. The same company that erased one chose to save the other. Chargers, Challengers, Super Bs, Daytonas, the full history, model by model, is in the video on screen right now.